Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Shift Book Club. I'm journalist. I'm not a journalist. I'm a journalist and creator of the Shift, Sam Baker, and I'm really happy to be here with Jennie Godfrey, author of our most popular book club pick so far, The List of Suspicious Things. Seriously, Jennie, I've never had to disappoint so many people. So many
Wow.
people I had to send away going, I'm really
You
sorry
will
they've all
shortly be
gone.
arriving at Maze Hill.
Oh, sorry, Derna, I'm just going to mute you. Derna's on the train. Um,
Clearly.
Yeah, Maze Hill. God, I used to get off there a long time ago. Anyway, set in Yorkshire in 1979, it's the story of Miv and her best friend Sharon, who decide to put their minds to finding the serial killer who had eluded the police, terrified the country, and irretrievably transformed their small town and their families. I mean, I say that Sharon has decided. Sharon didn't decide. Miv decided, and Sharon went along for the ride. It's funny, it's heartbreaking, it's dark, and it's really, really nostalgic, which I think we all need a little bit of right now. Now, as you all know, The List of Suspicious Things is Jennie's debut novel. And what a debut! It was published 3 weeks ago, went straight into the hardback fiction bestseller list at, was it number two or number three?
Number three.
Number three, and it's still at number four 3 weeks later. And it's been lauded by Marian Keyes, Zoe Ball, Elizabeth Day, me. Not bad going for a former HR director of a FTSE 100 company who chucked it all in to work in a bookshop and took a creative writing course, which I will be grilling you about later. Everybody wants to know all about that. Um, as usual, well, as I've said, we will avoid spoilers. We won't try, we will, but I don't think that will affect the conversation. So, Jennie, welcome. Welcome. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been really looking forward to this. Thank you, Sam.
So, let's start with where the story came from, because that's quite an interesting story in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as you alluded to, and I'm sure we'll go back to, I had basically had a massive midlife moment. I've stopped calling it a crisis. I've started calling it a moment, which led to me giving up my career and deciding to write. And my
We
first,
will talk about that a lot
we
more.
will,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
And my first attempt at writing was to try to write a psychological thriller because they were all the rage at the time. This was end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And I thought, I'll give that a go. And I started to write, and I was about 20,000 words in, I think, and I realized it was just terrible. It just wasn't very good. And part of the reason it wasn't very good is that it just had no beating heart. I could tell it wasn't alive, if that's the best way I can describe it, really. And I put it to
Sorry
one.
to interrupt you. Why was that? Was it because you were trying to write something that you thought people would want rather than
Yes,
something that was coming from the heart?
absolutely. It was because I was trying to, I mean, agents use the word right to market, and I was
Ugh.
trying to write with my sort of businesswoman head on, what's popular, I'll try and write that. And it just wasn't very good. Um, and I put it to one side, and I actually listened over the course of a day to Stephen King's On Writing. And somewhere inside me, it kind of must have bubbled. Um, because a day later, I went for a walk with the dog, and I just had the whole plot, characters, and title of The List of Suspicious Things downloaded into my brain. That's the only way I can describe it. Sounds like I'm making it up, sounds a bit woo-woo, but it is what happened to me. Now, I know that part of that is about my subconscious mind working on what I'd heard in on writing. And I'd also watched around that time the documentary, The Yorkshire Ripper Files, which is a brilliant BAFTA winning
Yeah.
documentary. about
You're amongst friends
that
here. We've
time.
all got
Thank
brain
you
fog.
so
It's fine.
much. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be around a group of women like this. And I'd watched that documentary and it had reminded me of my childhood, and it's a childhood I very rarely even think about. And it had reminded me as well that my dad worked with Peter Sutcliffe. So that was in my mind, as was Stephen King's On Writing. And somehow that all curdled, cooked, bubbled into the list of suspicious things. And I ran home from that dog walk and just started to write down what I'd seen and heard in this kind of dog walk moment. Because I knew it was something. I knew even then that this was something.
So, I mean, that sounds, like you say, it sounds insane, doesn't it? It sounds like,
Yeah.
oh, and then it just all
Yeah.
downloaded into my mind, and then I wrote the book, which I know isn't what happened. But so tell me then, so I mean, I know it's really annoying when people ask this question, so forgive me for being really annoying. How close to you, growing up in the late 70s in a small town in West Yorkshire, is, excuse me, is Miv?
It's not annoying at all. I actually don't know why people get annoyed about things like that, but maybe that's because I'm really comfortable with the fact that Miv's background is very similar to mine. She is a braver, more courageous version of me as a kid. And she's thinner than I ever was. So
God.
in the book, she's really thin, and her friend Sharon has got all the curves. Wasn't quite like that for me. But she does definitely have elements of me in her, as does Sharon. So the two of them combined would probably make me up just a less courageous version, I guess.
So where did the list idea come from? Because that's such a great idea.
That's the magic bit that I genuinely don't know. I mean, I live my life by lists. I've always got a list on the go. I'm very organized. I'm just one of those people. I have multiple lists, in fact, like a list for the month, a list for the week, and a list for the day. So maybe it's that. But as soon as I had the idea to structure the book in a list format, I was so excited because I knew even then, even not knowing anybody in publishing, not having an agent, not even having started to write the book, I knew there was something in that would be important.
So it's I want to go back to your childhood a bit in a minute, but
Yeah.
on the list and on, because it's a very potentially dark subject. I mean, it is a dark
Yes,
subject, no
it
question.
is.
It's, and you also have other like heavy issues like, the rise of the National Front and racism and poverty and class and all that. And yet the tone is really light, but not too light. Not
Yeah,
like in any way flippant.
no.
I just have to say, I'm really sorry to interrupt myself, but Di Mays has, I used to work with Di a long time ago when we were both on Cosmo.
Yeah.
And Di is the queen of the clipboard, and you might have just out clipboarded her.
Yes.
So,
I love it. That's
and I
brilliant.
have completely, yes. Okay, so we were talking about tone. Sorry, back
Yeah,
to tone.
so
Well,
fun.
how did you land on that? Is that your natural tone? Is that a tone in books that you had admired? What was it?
All of the above, I would say. I mean, what I really wanted to do with the book was reflect real life. And real life is sometimes really sad, and really dark and really difficult. I mean, I think about the time we're living through at the moment, and I really think it's tricky, it's difficult. But life is also funny and filled with love and kindness. And at the time I was writing it, we'd just gone into the first lockdown. And I'm sure everyone can remember that time really clearly. It was frightening. And it was really, I mean, I was terribly anxious about what was going to happen. But yet, there was all this kindness of people looking after each other in their communities. And I live really rurally, and people were just so lovely to each other. And so I guess what I wanted to do was reflect that in a book. Real life, dark, difficult, sometimes really tricky, filled with love and kindness, and often really funny. And a person whose writing I really admire, who does that, I think, brilliantly, is Marian Keyes.
The Queen.
Yeah, essentially. You are so right. But also another person is, and interestingly, I hadn't thought about her, but the list has been likened to her writing by lots of people, including Marian Keyes, and that's Sue Townsend in Secret Diary of Adrian Mole.
Oh, that is fantastic. If that's because you capture the voice of that teenager so well.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially why it's been compared, I guess. But Sue Townsend did that so well, that whole real normal people and the sadness and the poignancy and the funniness of normal life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, isn't it? Because last time we spoke, just for everybody here, Jennie and I met before when I interviewed her for You magazine, which was a very different sort of interview, much more gruesome, not much less midlife, much more gruesome. And when we were talking then, we were talking about the curious incident of the dog at night time and the truth about goats and sheep, Joanna Cannon's book. Again, both with lead characters who are in the kind of 9, 10, 11, 12 bracket. In that, somebody who can't come, I can't remember whether it was Nicole or Nicola, messaged me earlier and said about how well you have captured that transition from childhood to adolescence.
Well, that's because, and we were talking about this before, Sam, that's because I don't think I've ever grown up. And so I still have that, like quite a young mind in a way. I don't really know what I'm saying there, but I definitely feel still quite close to that adolescent brain. But also I luckily for me have kept a diary since I was about 12 or 13, and they're all in the cupboard behind me, like piles and piles of diaries. And if ever I felt like I'd lost my connection to Miv and her age, I would just look at my hilarious tween diaries to remind myself of how that works and how that feels.
Can we see them?
Yeah, you can. Hold on.
Excellent. I was expecting that cupboard to be more organised, weren't you?
I've just realised you can't, because there's boxes of blooming lists of suspicious things in front of them. Sorry.
That's a big letdown.
I'm so sorry.
I'll forgive you. Tell us about your childhood. What was it like what were you, 8 or 9 in 1979 when the Ripper was rife? Were you aware of the Ripper at that point?
Absolutely aware. So there are bits in the book that are based on real life, and most of it obviously is completely made up. But there are 2 events in the book that are absolutely direct from my childhood. The first is when the family are watching the 9 o'clock news and a policeman comes on and says another person has been killed, and he uses the word prostitute. And I remember watching it on black and white television and turning to my dad and saying, "What's a prostitute?" And my dad basically saying, "It's someone who helps the police." And for a really long time, that's what I thought a prostitute was, because that's what my dad told me. So that was from real life, as was the game Ripper Chase. So instead of playing Kiss Chase, it morphed into kind of Ripper Chase at that particular time. And then the other event that's from real life is the day that it was announced that Peter Sutcliffe had been caught, and my dad just stared at the television saying, but I know him. I know him. And then ran out to his works van to get his service records, which he used to basically service forklift trucks, and Peter Sutcliffe would sign those documents. And my dad wanted to show us his signature, just
So had he
because was...
serviced Peter Sutcliffe's lorry? Was that
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so, and I just remember that so clearly because he was like the bogeyman, or this kind of phantom that haunted our childhood. The fact that he became so close to our family was really shocking to me, even as a child. And what I've found really interesting is, as I have started doing events and talking about the book with people, I often get, in fact, I don't think it ever hasn't happened, I often get a queue of women at the end who want to tell me about their experience at that time. So I've had, people saying, I was at university at Leeds and we had to get a special bus home, or people who were younger who, when the television used to come on, I used to hide behind the sofa because I was so frightened of him. There's a real generational impact of those crimes, particularly on Northern women, but not just on Northern women, on every woman who was alive at the time, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't grow up in the North. I grew up in the South, and I was, so 1979, I would have been 12, 13. And I remember it really vividly. It was really scary. It was on the news all the time, at a point when the news was where you got the news. And it was, every night. And watching the news wasn't exactly like a family occasion, but it kind of was. I mean, everybody watched the news and the TV. So it was really, really vivid. I mean, did you, as a girl in the area where he was really active, did it restrict your freedom? Because there was a point, wasn't there, when it was about 78, 79, when it went from being that terrible thing that I think the police probably still do, but really were really bad then. Like, well, it's, just prostitutes, which is the word that they used then. And there was a moment when it shifted to be, oh my God, it could be anyone.
Yeah.
Was that,
Well, I mean, we lived a typical 70s childhood where you roamed from morning till night, particularly in the school holidays, without anyone knowing where you were or what you were doing. That was absolutely my experience, and I feel really actually grateful that I got that experience. But there was a moment when it changed, and it was after the death of Josephine Whittaker, who was 19. And around that time, I wasn't the happiest child. I didn't have the happiest childhood. Again, quite similar to Miv in that way. And I ran away from home, took my little tea set, my little toy tea set, filled it with orange juice, and ran away from home. And I can't remember how old I was. I can't have been much more than 9 or 10. maybe a bit younger, because definitely the
Where'd you
Ripper
go?
hadn't been caught. I went to the woods, as you do. And then I got cold and, wandered off to a lovely babysitter who used to look after me. And when I finally showed up, what I hadn't realised was that it had been taken incredibly seriously by the police. And when they came and got me and obviously reunited me with my family, they actually talked about the Ripper and said, we were very concerned for your welfare. And I remember being really shocked by that. I didn't actually believe that anyone would sort of notice. But that is when I realized it became in everyone's consciousness.
It's so interesting that you say that that's, every woman has got an experience of that. Did you, the first time that happened at a reading,
Yeah.
which I have to say, total respect to you for doing readings before the book was finished and out. I mean, very brave. I would never do that. Was it a surprise the first time that happened, that everybody had a
Yes.
story?
Yeah, really surprising, especially as it was in Cornwall. So that was the first, no, Devon. It was like a writing open mic thing in Devon that I just thought, I'm going to try it out and see if it works. And I couldn't believe how many women queued up to talk to me about it. Again, in Devon, not in Yorkshire. And I feel sort of privileged to hear those stories, because I don't think I'd realised quite how much of an impact it had on other people outside of me and my family, and the North. But yeah, it was a real surprise to me.
I mean, when you were writing it, Sarah Everard was murdered, wasn't she?
Yes, that's
And
right.
that, you know, I was thinking about that in the context of this book again this week with all the stuff that's been coming out about him. Did that influence your writing at the
Yes,
time?
hugely. And I think, I mean, I can't remember where exactly I was in the book when that happened, but what I do remember is people really, there was an outpouring on social media of women talking about being afraid of walking home, of being attacked or whatever, and kind of saying, gosh, so little has changed. And here I am writing a book about that same kind of fear, but set in the 1970s. And I found that it really influenced how I wrote about women's fear. I think I turned the dial up because I realized just how important it was to express that for myself as much as for anyone else. It really was.
I mean, the other kind of big theme in the book really is about family and community, isn't it? In a small town. Tell us a bit more about that.
Um, yeah, so it is really interesting that we did the terrible thing of moving down south. And
Oh my God, traitor.
I know it's terrible. Hence, I don't have a Yorkshire accent, because basically everyone called me Hovis on the first day at my school in the south. And as an impressionable young woman, I changed my voice, which now I really regret. But anyway,
Just a second. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking, will everybody get that Hovis reference?
if
Laurie,
you're
I'm
in the
pretty
States, you
sure
won't. No,
Laurie won't. Can you quickly
of
explain it?
course. So there is a really famous advert for Hovis bread in the UK, which was basically a boy pushing a bike up a big hill, which wasn't even in Yorkshire, but
Where was it?
it was Shaftesbury. But anyway, he was pushing a bike up like a cobbled hill and basically talking about, oh, when I were a lad, that kind of thing. And it's such a famous advert in the UK, and everyone would call me Hovis after that advert because of my Yorkshire accent.
So you went posh.
I went posh. Although if anyone here was from Yorkshire and talked to me for more than 5 minutes, I'd quickly morph back into a Yorkshire accent. But the growing when I that first sort of 10, 11 years in Yorkshire, that small town felt so different to the city we moved down to, which was, I mean, you couldn't get more different to West Yorkshire than Milton Keynes, let me tell you. And I didn't appreciate when I was growing up, because you don't. I didn't appreciate what being part of a community like that meant. And I think I am nostalgic for that myself. And hence, it wasn't meant to be a theme of the book. Like, I didn't set out to write a book about community, but it ended up being very much about that, which I think is also influenced by the COVID lockdown time that I wrote it, and how people showed up for each other at that time.
I mean, you were living, by that point, you had moved down to the West Country. I mean, were living in a very isolated
Very.
situation at that point?
Yeah, so I mean, this house that I'm speaking to you from, my nearest neighbour is about a quarter of a mile away. It's off a single track road. You know, it was a very strange experience, lockdown, for me, because I'd only recently, 6 months to a year before, moved to a rural location. And then suddenly it was just me and the dog and no one else. But yet people would sort of trek over fields and hills. Like I'd come home after walking the dog, and sometimes like there'd be homemade jam from a woman that lives quarter of a mile
Mm.
away. It was really incredible how people just made sure that they checked in on each other, especially as I'm not from the area at all. I'm just the weird writer that lives on the hill.
Haven't you always wanted to be the weird writer that lives on the hill?
100%. 100%. Like, I could not be happier with that. Couldn't be happier.
I mean, why did you, let's go back a bit. Did it ever occur to you to try to be a writer when you were at university?
So I mean, I wanted to be a writer as a kid. So if you'd asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have actually said an authoress. So I was very obsessed with that expression, authoress. And I love Enid Blyton, which I hope is reflected in the book. I know she's problematic now, but growing up, her books for me were just such an amazing escape. And I did do English at university, but I don't think I ever really thought that it was possible for me to write books. I think I wanted to be a journalist, I think. I wanted to write in some way, shape, or form, but even that felt like, I got into, I don't think I said this to you before, Sam, but I got into LSE to do a master's after university, but I couldn't afford it. I didn't
Mm.
have money to pay to do something like that. And so I just kind of gave up on such fantasies and went to work, because that's what you did. And in fact, my dad was cross I even went to university, because for him, it's like, what are you doing fannying around? You need to get to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember who it was, but I was talking to someone the other day, probably for a podcast recording. Because I don't actually talk to people in real life. I
No.
never talk to people podcasts and book club. And they were saying, oh, I just didn't come from a gap year family. And I know exactly
Yes.
that. I mean, I wouldn't have even dared ask. It would have just been like, who do you think you are? You know,
Yeah. Ideas above your station. 100%.
exactly. I
Yeah.
think you capture that really well, actually. I mean, Shelley has said that she's loved the location, the community is such a key character, if you like, in the
Thank
book.
you.
And
Yeah.
I think that also that the northerners and or you talked about but normal early, just normal,
Yes.
ordinary, that kind of life, that kind of two up, two down, you know, one kid or
Yeah.
two kids, mum, dad, going to school, going home, playing out, you know, what life was like then and what that kind of expectation was for a kid,
Yes.
a ordinary kid, wherever they
Yeah.
lived in the country.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the other characters in the book.
So actually I've been obviously since publication, I've been talking a lot about the book and the characters. And I've realized that all the characters are aspects of myself because that is just what happens. Oh, Laurie has just basically, I was just about to say Auntie Jean. Thank you, Laurie. I love Auntie Jean. And I'm going to do a really massive name drop here because I can. The first thing that Zoe Ball said to me when she interviewed me on Radio 2 was, everyone needs an Auntie. Everyone needs an Auntie Jean in their life. I love her. I adore her. And Auntie Jean is based on my real Auntie Jean, who was a significant influence on me growing up. Because for all I've said about, you know, the kind of upbringing I had, my Auntie Jean, who's just like the Auntie Jean in the book, except my Auntie Jean married up. So she
Oh,
married.
marrying up. Oh,
She married up and she married a scrap metal millionaire who they bought basically a big house in the I can see there's discussion about who would play her in a film. Don't start
yeah.
me on this. But
No, who would you like to play
I
her?
don't know, but I think Emma Thompson is a really good shout, whoever's put her. I think she'd be
Laurie. Yeah.
amazing at it. Um
So yeah,
but
Auntie Jean, she married
yeah, so she
the rich
married up.
scrap metal.
And they basically bought a really old, proper old, 600 years old, massive mansion in the Lake District. And I'm saying it's a massive mansion. It was really run down, and it still had the same kitchen 40 years, the 40 years they lived in it. But I used to go, yes, scrap metal. Shelley's basically saying scrap metal millionaire only in Yorkshire, and that's so
Yeah,
true. That is so
yeah.
true. They were posh Yorkshire, which means not very posh at all. But they lived in this massive house, and I used to go and spend my summers with them, to give my mum and dad a rest. And she sort of taught me that, or showed me that I didn't have to limit my ambition, that I might have, there might be more to life than I was perhaps shown. She just really broadened my horizons in life. And she is a real character. She does have dementia now, which is desperately sad because she was so bright. But she was of a generation of women who were not taught to follow their ambitions at all. So what she used to do was she would grow vegetables and win all the competitions in their local area in the Lake District, to the extent that everyone hated her because she always grew the best vegetables and won every competition. And that was so her to be like, well, if all I can do is grow vegetables, then I'm going to grow the best vegetables and I'm going to win all the competitions. And I really wanted to honor her in the book and honor women like her in the book, because I know that everyone's got kind of an Auntie Jean character, particularly if they're from Yorkshire. So obviously she's a big character in the book. But people often ask me who's my favorite character, and while that's a bit like asking who's your favorite child, not that I have children, I adore Omar with my whole heart. He is the shopkeeper who
Yeah,
befriends the
he's.
girls.
I love him.
He's my
Yeah, and I love
favorite.
his taste in music.
He's just, yeah, he's got great taste in music.
I wouldn't go that
Kind,
far.
he's funny. He's just, I love him. And again, back to casting. If anybody watches Ted Lasso, the show Ted Lasso, there's a guy in Ted Lasso who would play Omar. That's Nick Mohammed, who plays Nate, the coach.
Have you sold the screen rights?
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet.
Interest?
Yes. Yes. I mean, since it's been published, well, since it's been a Sunday Times bestseller for 3 weeks, my inbox right now is hysterically funny. Like, I just can't get my head around it. Yeah.
There's a lot of love for the Nick suggestion.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Oh, yeah, he would be
Yeah,
amazing.
do you
We
want Di to
tried,
ask him?
we, yeah, please, whoever.
Yeah,
If
accost
anyone
him
who
in
knows,
M&S.
please. But we wanted him for the audiobook, but he was filming Taskmaster and he couldn't. I love Taskmaster, so I don't mind.
Did you have a lot of fun with the music, with the soundtrack, and
Yeah.
all those kind of 70s details, the skinny jeans, and they were coming in, and the black cherry lip gloss, and the terrible music. I mean, the excellent, terrible music.
Yeah. So I have one of those brains where you want me on your Trivial Pursuit team because I retain useless information. Like I really do store it. So, you put me in that situation where I'm writing about the 1970s and I can remember details that many people would have forgotten. And what I really remember about being a kid, one of my strongest memories, is of sitting in the back of my dad's car, listening to like John Denver and the Carpenters and David Soul as well. And I mean, I think
God.
everybody is like this. I know all the words to those songs. Yeah, I can't remember what I had for my tea yesterday. And I really immersed myself in that. I only listened to 70s music while I was writing, and it's so evocative that it helps kind of remember all the other things. And oh, Laurie, I'm loving this. You've clearly read it because
And
Laurie's
very
just
recently,
saying,
clearly.
yes,
Yeah.
in her new bra and her cherry lip gloss, anything was possible. And that's so true. I remember those rollerball lip glosses so well. And when I
Oh
finally got
God, they
one,
were
I felt
such a
like I
thing
was,
that you just had
yeah,
to have.
I was hot with that cherry lip gloss.
All the
Oh,
cool girls at my school
yep.
shoplifted them though.
So I shoplifted my first one. The
You realise
shame.
this goes out on YouTube, don't you?
Oh
You're going
my
to get
goodness. Oh,
busted. Yeah.
yeah.
Was it
My
Woolworths?
goodness. No. It was corner shop.
Oh, pull the shot. That's
I know.
rotten. Trouble is,
Terrible.
that's the easiest place, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Especially.
you need to fess up, you lot. Who's got like a shoplifting history? Um, and everybody is tumbleweed in the chat box. We are going to run over a little bit, but do pop any questions you've got in the box, won't you?
Didn't
Because
realize what time it
I
was.
know it's 7:45 and we've hardly even got going. Right, what should we talk about? I've got so many questions. I'm feeling like I need to use my questions that I've got left wisely. So tell us a bit more about that big leap, that leaving a huge corporate job and going, what?
Yeah.
What was the decision? What was the thought process? Were
Oh,
you going a bit mad?
yeah. I
Menopause madness.
absolutely going mad. And I had an experience very like you, Sam, because I've told you already that I read The Shift and
I
it
paid her to say
was,
that.
no, you didn't. because The Shift was the first book that I'd read that really reflected the experience that I had had, because I went into perimenopause a bit early, in my very early 40s, and most of the symptoms I experienced were with my mental health and emotions. And eventually I Googled what's going on, and found out that I was in perimenopause, new
Yeah.
word, perimenopause that way. And I sunk into a really deep depression, really deep, to the extent that I just didn't know if I was ever going to recover. And I had a long period off work. I was signed off for 6 months, and I really struggled during that whole 6 months. And when I eventually sort of went back to work, not really being that much better, really, but being well enough to work, I just had a real midlife moment where, I mean, two things happened. One is I've eventually sorted my hormones out, which was really important, because I mean, if I'd stayed in that place, that would have been awful. But I went to the Newsom clinic, and they got me sorted hormonally. But at the same time, I also realized that I no longer wanted to do that work anymore, or work in a corporate environment anymore, to the extent that I hated it. And I mean, viscerally, physically, I couldn't do it anymore. And I felt like I was losing my whole identity, because my whole adult life had been spent getting the next job and doing the next thing. And it had really mattered to me being HR director and all of that. And it felt sudden, but it wasn't, that I suddenly felt like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't who I am. This isn't who I want to be. And I did what I would not recommend anyone else do, but it was what I did, which is I just gave it up. I I handed in my notice. Well, I was very lucky. I had a wonderful boss who the company was going through a takeover at the time. So therefore I had the opportunity to take redundancy, which I did. But I had nothing else to go to, and I only had enough money to last a certain amount of time. But I felt like, and it felt like I was jumping off a cliff, very much so. I was really frightened, and I don't want to minimize that, because now I can look in hindsight and go, thank God I did. But at the time, it was terrifying. But I also knew there were two things in my mind. One was I remember reading something about menopause, and it saying change or die, which is quite dramatic, but it felt like that to me. I felt like I have to do something, or I'll die. And that was going on. And the second thing that was going on is I was so unhappy that I was almost like, I'd prefer uncertainty to this level of unhappiness. And so that's what I did. I chose to just give it all up. And what I did at the time was go, I suppose, trust that something would come up. I didn't know what that would be, but I decided to write a book in the meantime.
As you do.
Yeah, do you know, I'm going to write a book in the meantime.
Sitting in your bedroom writing a book, or did you sign up for a creative writing course?
Yes.
How did you approach it?
So I realized when I wrote the failed psychological thriller, that I needed help. You know, you can't just write a book and it be perfect. So I signed, with some of my redundancy money, I did a Curtis Brown creative course, and they're a big literary agency, but that also have a writing school. And I signed up for one of their courses, and I'm so glad I did, because they were brilliant. It was like a bit of an accelerated learning how to structure a novel and, not have it be terribly boring. They're really, I mean, I love their programs. They're great. And of course it was online, so it was perfect for during that lockdown. It also kept me really occupied during that time. And again, I mean, there's so much serendipity in this story, or synchronicity, both, I think, because at the end of that course, Curtis Brown sent out like an anthology of work of the people who'd done the program to literary agents. And so my literary agent found me, not the other way around. And it so happens that the literary agent who found me is Nell Andrew, who is a force of nature and a force to be reckoned with. And she's very well known in the industry, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, she's an amazing agent. She represents some brilliant people. So what was the I'm going to ask you questions in a second, Tanya. Well, but what was the process after that? Because when you sent her the book, I mean, I have to say, I know a few people who are represented by Nell, and she is notorious for, like, not letting it out of her sight until she's decided that it's perfect. So she's
Yeah.
tough taskmaster. So
Yeah.
when she took it on, did you have much work to do? Is this what you sent her, or
No,
was
my
it
God, no. So
was the
I sent her.
structure what
Oh,
changed?
so actually, and I feel really proud of this. So the title, the structure, the characters, the plot essentially are all exactly the same. I feel really proud of that. But
Yeah, you
yes,
should.
she did not let it out the door for another year. So I spent a year working in Waterstones part-time and rewriting the book essentially. I am a chronic underwriter, so the version I sent her was 67,000 words. This is 110,000 words. So during that year, it almost doubled in size. But she basically put me through writing boot camp. She highlighted for me the things that were missing, and a lot of that was kind of the detail and the really deep characterization. She would just basically, I'd send it to her every 3 months and then she'd go more. And so
Yeah.
I'd have to do more. And then she'd say
Yeah.
more again. We did that for a year. And that sounds really tough, but I loved it. I loved it. It was just brilliant. And I was also
Really
terrified
valuable.
she'd never say yes, it's ready to go.
Yeah, you'd still be rewriting it now.
Yeah.
But so was your original all from Miv's perspective?
Yes, yes. So that is the major change that she made, or she asked me to make, was to add in some adult voices in order to really give a rounded sense of the community. And she was right to do that. I knew even when she emailed me to say that, I knew she was right, and she was right. It makes it a much richer book.
So tell us about, because the process of selling the book was it was one of those it never happens fairy tales, wasn't it? So tell us some more about that.
Yeah, but if anyone's an aspiring writer, just plug your ears, because it's just one of those stories where even all my writer friends just go, flipping heck,
No, it's motivating.
Well, I mean, I suppose what it is proof it happens, because it does
Totally.
happen. And I'm
It's going
not
to
a
happen to
celebrity.
someone. Why
Yeah,
not you?
yeah, why not me? So when Nell eventually said it's definitely ready, she said, I'm gonna send it out on this particular week, and we'd got it all planned and stuff. I knew it was in the diary. On the Thursday before it was due to go out on the Monday, unfortunately my mum was taken ill. She is fine, but she was taken ill at the time, and I had to go up to Milton Keynes and go to the hospital. And on that morning that happened, Nell emailed me and just said, look, Jenny, I've decided I want to give editors the opportunity to read the book over the weekend. So I've sent it out today, but just chill. Nothing's going to happen. And in fact, usually what happens when a book goes on submission is it's usually about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Sometimes it's earlier than that, but very rarely. Sometimes it can be months that people are on submission for. So I was very relaxed about it. And I didn't even read the email because I was so relaxed about it. I was thinking, okay, well, the editors she sent it to will take it home at the weekend and read it. And then next week it'll all happen. So I did my thing, went to the hospital, and as I was driving back, it was a really hot sunny day, and I was mum was okay, and I was merrily driving along. And my phone rang. So this was 8 hours after the submission had gone to publishers. And my phone rang, and it was Nell, and she said, "Are you driving? Could you pull over? We've had our first offer." And that first offer was from an incredible publisher for a nice amount of money. And we declined it. And over the next 24 hours, the book sold to one of the big players at Penguin in a way that I just still can't get my head around. And because I was at my mum's and it'd all been a bit of a rush, I was talking to really senior editors in the car park of Stoke Mandeville Hospital, wearing my most terrible leggings and a sweatshirt and trying to look like I was a very serious author person. So yeah, it had sold by the end of that Friday.
And what was it that made you pick the person you picked? Because it's not, I mean, money's nice, but it's not just about money, is it?
No. And it's really interesting because I made a very instinctive decision, turned out to be the right one, but it was very instinctive. So the person who bought it in the end is a woman called Venetia Butterfield, and she is one of the MDs at Penguin. And I didn't know her at all. Of course I didn't. But I'd Googled her and seen that she got a great track record. But before I spoke to her, she messaged me to say, basically, "I know you're going to be nervous, but you need to know that I'm really nervous too, because I really want to publish your book. And my dad smelled a swarfiga." And in the book, there's a bit where Miv talks about her dad's smell being a swarfiga. And I knew when I got that message that she was, oh, I've got goosebumps. I knew when I got that message that she was the right person, and she has proved to be everything she said she was going to do for the book. She has done. It's been incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. And they've really delivered, haven't they, on every level, and still are.
Yeah,
So it was a 2-book deal, wasn't it?
No, it's 1 book.
Oh, is it 1?
Mm-hmm.
But you are writing a 2nd book, aren't you?
I am.
Tanya's asked how it's going. We all want to know how it's going.
Oh, it's so slow. It's much harder. It's much harder to write a book when your first book is a Sunday Times bestseller, let me tell you. I mean, Sam, you must have experienced something similar after the success
I have not
of
written a Sunday Times bestseller, but I think the 2nd book is always hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. So, yes, I am writing another book, and it's just very slow.
Clues?
Yeah, so it's
little clues.
Still set in the north, still around the same sort of themes, but this time structured around a contemporary and fictional crime. Yeah.
So it's completely contemporary, not 70s.
Not 70s, but it will still have flashbacks in it, but more to the 1990s, early 2000s. Yeah.
So what's your writing playlist for this one?
Oh, it's things like McFly and early noughties kind of music, which I'm enjoying immensely. I really am enjoying it immensely. One of the characters is a big McFly fan.
It's playlists. Authors' playlists are one of my favorite things.
Yes, me
I
too. I
just
love
think
it.
they should always be supplied with books, definitely.
Yes, I do have one on Spotify. There is a list of suspicious things playlist on
oh,
Spotify.
is there?
Oh yeah,
Have you got the
yeah.
link? Can you pop the
I
link
will.
in the chat?
Oh, I don't know if I can pop the link in the chat because I don't. It'll take me a while to get to it.
Is it under,
Um,
okay, is it under your name or is it under the list of suspicious
it'll
things?
be under list of suspicious things. It's a penguin, like the team have put it up there.
The Penguin team have, brilliant, because
Yeah.
there's the One Day team put up the one from the
Yes.
Netflix series,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
absolutely fantastic.
Yes. I need
Um,
to listen to that.
it's really, really good. Tanya also wants to know because she is a journaling obsessive. Yes, Tanya, before you ask,
I.
I am still journaling. Um, do
Yes, I
you still
do.
keep a diary? You do? Do
Yeah.
you
uh, It,
journal or diary, really?
it's journaling. I mean, I'm a big one of the things I did do that I haven't said at all. Um, at the beginning of all of this was The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Did
Um,
you?
I
Oh, so
did.
important.
It was
She's
life-changing for
amazing.
me, Sam. It was life-changing. I
So do you do your
genuinely
morning
think
pages
I
then?
do. I'm really strictly.
Tanya,
And
there you go.
the I talked about obviously that woo-woo moment on the dog walk. I absolutely attribute that to doing the artist's way and it opening my creative mind and unblocking my creative mind.
That's
Anybody who
interesting.
hasn't
So
read
had you
it, she's
done your
amazing.
morning pages before you went
Yeah,
on your dog walk?
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And I do them now, and they are, they are essentially. I'll show you my book just to prove it. I also have a crow. The uh, the number of crow-based presents I've had
Yeah.
for publication. I also have a crow tattoo now. Um,
Can we see that, or is that not appropriate
yeah,
for
no, it's
YouTube?
here.
Oh yeah, there. Oh yeah, nice.
I had it done. I promised myself that if I got Sunday Times bestseller, I'd have a crow tattoo. So I did, and that's my morning pages book.
Wow.
All
I'm
happens.
impressed. I'm very impressed. Anybody else got any questions? If not, don't worry, because we are actually out of time, but I'm having a good chat.
Yeah,
Can I ask you one more cheeky question? And you
of
can
course
say
you can.
no. And
Yes.
it might not be easy to deliver, but you remember when we met last time, you showed me a picture of you before the change, before the shift in your HR job.
Yes.
Have you got that picture? Can we see
Yeah,
it?
let
Because I
me.
think it is so interesting. And if there is anybody here who is kind of feeling in a place, the place that I felt like I was in my mid 40s, and the place that Jennie was in, where you kind of stop knowing yourself because of what's going on hormonally and all that other stuff. It
Yes.
shows you, this picture really demonstrates the scale of the change that Jennie
And it,
has affected on herself in terms of like emotionally and psychologically, but also physically, because,
yes.
well, you'll see.
Just bear with me a second because I just need to find because I know there's one in particular, there's a photo in particular that I look at and just go, oh my goodness. I'm sure it's here. Yes. Here we go. Now, whether you'll be able to see this or not.
You can't see it brilliantly, but you can see.
Look, so
Check out the blonde,
I mean, I'm
long blonde bob.
long blonde hair, the kind of LK Bennett suit. I mean, I'm a lot thinner, but I cannot tell you how unhappy I was at that time.
It's so, I think it's just so
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Just that kind of, and also kind of making that leap and doing the thing that you had always wanted to do since you were a little girl.
yeah. And I genuinely, I mean, say this all the time. I have never, not once have I regretted. And even in the moments before, so there were 2 years essentially before I got a book deal, during which I mean, I can't even tell you financially was really tricky. But even throughout all of that, I never once regretted it. Not once.
Not even when you had to get up on Boxing Day and go and work in Waterstones in Taunton.
No, I
You
bloody
didn't
love
think, what
working
have
in
I done?
Waterstones. Oh, it's the best job ever. I love it.
You still
I
do
mean,
it?
I'm not working there at the moment. It would be very tricky. And
Oh, yeah,
we're
can you
talking
imagine?
about whether
Be
I can
moving
go.
your books all the time. Yeah.
We're talking about, I was saying, I don't even think I can come back for Christmas, but the following Christmas I will.
We are out of time, so we should probably stop. But before we do, Laurie's just said, I wish we were in a wine bar chatting, and I really do too. And I think we should make that happen if you don't mind the trip, Laurie, because it's a bit further for you than it is for everybody else. I'm just going to be a bit cheeky, Jenny, and use
Yes.
the end of this to announce next month's book club. This
Yes.
this month's book
I'll be
club.
in.
Um,
Oh my God, is
uh,
it the Painter's
it's
Daughters?
the Painter's Daughter.
Emily is my
Um,
friend and I love
oh,
it.
is she? Well,
Yes,
it's the Painter's Daughter, so Emily will be. You can come next month. You
I
can come.
will come.
Um, this is something a bit different from the last. Well, everything's a bit different. This is a bit different, and this is about Gainsborough's daughters. It comes with a quote from Hilary Mantel, who raced through it. Um, Usual thing, I'll be announcing it like tomorrow or Friday, but because you're here, you know the drill. If you would like a copy, you get to jump the queue, email me, let me know, and I'll put you on the list before everybody else. If you don't email me, I won't. So don't be fed up if you don't get one.
It's
Thank
excellent.
you. It is
Genuinely excellent.
really, really excellent.
Yeah.
And we'll be having a much more erudite conversation next month.
What are you saying?
Thank you, Jenny. You've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I'll see you next month. Good
Lovely.
night,
Thank you
everybody.
so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.